All right. This is our final Friday for this Rotary year. And as I said last month, we have hit our goal. And we're going to knock it further out of the park this year. And the good thing about it is that once everybody gets used to beating the heck out of the goal, then next year's goal is just easy peasy. And I think AJ and I are going to raise it anyway, so what the heck. I wanted to talk a little bit about charitable giving in general, and then give you my personal foundation story. Now, I know that you all know I love the Rotary Foundation, I talk about it all the time. And this is the other reason that Dick Johnson is Rotarian of that I'm thinking decade, millennium, forever, because he put this together to a list of all of our Paul Harris Fellows. Now, I sent him a spreadsheet, just kind of a crappy Excel spreadsheet, and this is what it looks like. See, this is why you give stuff to smart, arty people. So I'm going to give a little bit of history of the Rotary Foundation, and then we're going to have Final Friday. We have great items. And the other thing is that Scott Heller, who's not here, but I swear he told me I could do this. This, if you remember from last year, is Stick It to Scott Friday. So for every single dollar that we in this room donate today, Scott's going to match it. And that's a big deal. He loves the Rotary Foundation. Paul Harris, our founder, said, whatever Rotary may mean to us, to the world, it will be known by the results that it achieves. The Rotary Foundation started in 1917, which was 12 years after the start of Rotary, with a donation of $26.50 that was left over from an international convention. And the Rotary Foundation's first gift was $500, and it was to the International Society for Crippled Children. It was made in 1930, but that later went on to become March of Dimes. So Rotary's been involved with helping children. We are truly international. Only 16 years after being founded, Rotary was on 6 continents. And now we're in nearly every country. And even in the countries we're not actually in, we work to help them. Our signature project is obviously the polio eradication campaign. It started in 1979. And the idea was there were this many children who needed immunizations. Each immunization cost this much. You multiply those together, that's how much money you needed. And that turned out to be a really idealistic way of looking at it because it didn't take into account wars and prejudices and all sorts of other things that would prevent us from getting to all the children. But after all that, today, it's only endemic in 3 countries after being endemic in 125. So it's a lot of progress. We're not quite there. You may have seen on the news that some polio eradicators were murdered in Pakistan last month, just, because it's a hard country to be in. So we're not going to stop. And Rotary is dedicated. We have 6 areas of focus: promoting peace, fighting disease, providing clean water, sanitation, and hygiene, saving mothers and children, supporting education, and growing local economies. And if you look, one of these days we're going to do a diary of everything that this club has been involved in through the Rotary Foundation, and you'll see that we have hit all those areas of focus, even before those areas of focus were in place and named. A program that we don't have anymore, but one that I loved, and it's my personal story. We all have personal reasons for giving to charities. We've had family members touched by cancer or suicide or Alzheimer's or heart disease. And even though some of those things have happened in my life too, what moves me the most, what gets my heart, is the Rotary Foundation. And the program that gets me the most is Group Study Exchange. Now sadly, it is not still a program of Rotary Foundation, but it has kind of morphed into vocational training teams. But Group Study Exchange, and Andreas in our club was a member of a Group Study Exchange team many years ago. And the composition of it was 1 Rotarian and then 4 non-Rotarians between the ages of 25 and 40. And the 5 people would travel to another country for a month. Sometimes the teams had a focus of a particular profession. You know, they might all be health people or engineers or whatever, but they stayed with families in those other in that other country, and we had a team here too. How many of you have hosted a GSE team member or met one? It's been gone for a little while, but in 2002, when I was a district governor-elect, I was a little further along the path than Dustin is right now, but I was still, you know, in the line. And I was driving along and going somewhere, and I got a call from somebody who's going to be a governor with me, and he said, "What have you done about GSE?" And I said, "I don't know, I'm thinking about it in a couple of different countries." And he said, "Well, how about Vietnam?" And I said, "Well, I haven't been to Rotary.org in a couple hours because I've been in my car, but did Vietnam become a Rotary country again?" And he said, "No, but there might be a way." And so with those few little words, there was kind of a logistical, crazy, cultural, heartstring pulling explosion. So the Rotary Foundation gave special permission to 4 districts. District 5030 in Seattle, District 5150 in San Francisco, 5170 Oakland area, and then ours 5130 to do an exchange. Now, since there's no Rotary in Vietnam, we couldn't find Rotarians to lead the team over there. But fortunately, we had a woman on the ground. Her name is Sue McKinney, and she was an attorney in California, but she's been living in Vietnam for decades. So she found us. She found all the teams. There were lots and lots of phone calls. It was logistically crazy. I still have the emails and the correspondence from all those years ago because it's just fun to read sometimes. And then there was, you know, our government was involved because Vietnam's a communist country, and they were worried about defectors. I mean, there was just a lot to think about. And then, just as they were getting ready to come to our 2 states, Washington and California, the SARS epidemic broke out. Remember SARS? A sudden something respiratory. So I started losing host families in this district because they were fearful of being, even though SARS wasn't in the part of Vietnam where they were coming from. You know, the facts don't always convince people that, you know, things are what they are. So anyway, somebody from Fort Bragg called me beforehand. He said, "I've lost 3 host families. What can I do?" And I said, "Well, find some more." And then he said, "Well, tell me their schedule again." And I said, "Well, they're going to be with me the first 3 days. The last 10 days they'll be around." He said, "Oh, they're going to be with you first? Okay, well, I think we're good. We'll call you, and if you're not in the hospital or dead, then we'll have host families." So I put my body on. So the team arrived in San Francisco in April of 2003, and we were instantly enchanted by the 5 of them. They had great English, which was a help in communication, and they were just fascinated by everything that they saw here. And a lot of them had relatives who had come here during the conflict or right after 1975. So there was just a lot of history and culture put together. And some of them had children, so they were really interested in what our schools looked like, and they were interested in our food, and they cooked for us, and we cooked for them. And at the district conference that year, which was down in Fortuna, the breakfast on the last morning, Sunday, was at the Ingomar Club. And Sue McKinney had come over for the conference, and she wanted to make Mr. Fat, who was the team leader, a Paul Harris Fellow, but all the paperwork hadn't gotten done, and so she looked across the table, and there was somebody sitting there with their Paul Harris pin on, and she said, "Can I borrow it? I'll get it back to you." So in my governor newsletter that month, I said, "Okay, well, you know, we got somebody's pin. I want to get it back to them. They'll let me know who it was." And so this is the email that I got in response. I'm going to read it to you. I don't have it quite memorized. It's from Tom Croft, a member in Santa Rosa. "Hi, Terry. That was my pin, and it's part of a good story. So you know, I was stationed in Vietnam with the Fleet Marine Force in 68-69. Not a pretty sight, but I had it so much better than most. So I'm mostly a normal guy who lived through it, but never has had closure. When we had the GSE team speak at our club, it was the first time in 34 years I had had contact with non-refugee Vietnamese. We were their kickoff presentation, and it wasn't great. We were all polite. At the conference, I got a much clearer view of the project. We had Ha sit with us at dinner and enjoyed her company. I thought about the fact that quite a few of us at the conference had served in Vietnam and wondered if there was a way to possibly have it be a positive recognition, let us, quote, get over it, unquote. I could see that it might go wrong. If I had thought of a way to accomplish what I wanted, I would have asked you to do it, but it was fine. Better to keep private demons private. So we were sitting there at the Carson House enjoying the setting and the program. Gradually, the Vietnamese guests lit up with their singing, and Mr. Phat, the team leader, started competing with Jay Leno. Saigon Sue was sitting at the next table. She looked back at me and asked for my pen and went up to do her presentation. She assured me that she would get the pen back to me, and I wasn't worried and was glad to help. We all enjoyed the rest of the morning, and then we left. After breakfast, I saw Mr. Phat talking to some people on the sidewalk. I approached him, shook his hand, and congratulated him on the presentation. Then I pointed to the pen, told him what an honor had been bestowed on him, and said that by coincidence it was my pen. He looked startled and started to take it off to give it back. I quickly assured him that it was his to keep and that I was honored to help. He reached over and hugged me. I'm looking over my shoulder for loggers and pickups driving by wondering about this. Then he said that I should come to visit him in Vietnam. I told him that I had already been there. He thought I meant through Rotary and asked when. When I said 68 and 69, he said, oh, bad time, bad time. I laughed and I agreed. I then told him that many of us in the conference had been there then and that this was maybe the first, or at least the most positive experience we had had involving their country. I assured him that I knew those years were harder on them than on us, but they were still painful. Mr. Phat reached over for my hand, looked me deeply in the eyes, and said, maybe it's time that we all let bygones be bygones. This time, I was the one who reached out and hugged him, and I didn't worry about the loggers. For me, it was quite a moment. I had a sensation of weight being lifted from my shoulders. I had his friend take a picture of us arm in arm. Can you put the picture up? Yeah. Okay, can we come back to that? Okay, it's fine. I am having the picture blown up and will hang it under the framed Paul Harris Award hanging in my office. I will see it every day and think of an actual person that I know in Vietnam, my friend, Mr. Phat. Don't worry about replacing the pen. I'm getting another one next month. Besides, I'm the only Rotarian in the entire world whose Paul Harris pin was the first to be awarded to someone in Vietnam. How could you replace that? So, my father served in Vietnam. I know lots of other people have those kind of connections. And the following year after the district conference, I went to Vietnam. And I don't know that. It's good. I have a picture. I have that picture. You'll see it later. And I went to Vietnam, and sitting in the internet cafe at the hotel, sending emails to people, you know, with the subject line "Greetings from Hanoi," was one of those like shaky moments in life where I felt, what the heck, you know, that Hanoi had always been that place, and now I was there, and I was with those people. So, and Rotary's still not in Vietnam, but maybe it'll get there someday, and it used to be there until 1959. So that's my Rotary Foundation story. I have lots more, but I'm not going to share them with you right now. And it's why I do what I do for the Rotary Foundation, and anyway, you guys all know. So we're good, yes?
Can I just come up and say something?
Yes, you can.
I'm going to. I don't know why I asked permission. I'm going to do it anyway. So I did put this slideshow together, and I did it without realizing something. And it's one of the reasons I'm so proud of this club. So proud of you members, so proud of knowing all of you generous people. It's amazing. I took it on thinking, it won't take very long. We have Associated Rotary Club over 180 Paul Harris Fellows. And that's just the baseline. We also have a lot of people, like obviously Terry, Bob Johnson, and a lot of, and I'm not going to start naming names because I'm going to leave out a lot of people, but a lot of people are repeat offenders, if you will. You know, they give and give and give. And, well, I should say, you give and give and give. And it goes to the Rotary Foundation, one of the most efficient, one of the most highly rated charities in the world. And you can all be proud of that. You can all be proud of being part of this club. You can all be proud that your money is going to help people all over the world and in our local communities. So
That's what I just.
Thank you. My plan, I like that.
And if you don't know how many people are in a list before you start making one of these, you might want to ask.
And again, really, I sent him a crummy spreadsheet, and this is what we got, so it's beautiful. Thank you.